The cable was classified top secret//no foreign. It contained the American negotiating position for upcoming talks with European allies about new sanctions against Iran's missile program, specific pressure points, red lines, fallback positions, the complete strategy that American diplomats would deploy in Geneva 3 days later. Within 6 hours of transmission, the cable's contents were in Tehran. The Iranian Foreign Ministry knew exactly what concessions the Americans would accept. They knew which European allies were wavering. They knew the precise moment when American negotiators would walk away from the table. When the Geneva talks collapsed, American diplomats were baffled. The Iranians had seemed to anticipate every move, counter every argument, exploit every weakness. They had no idea they had been betrayed. For 4 years, an Iranian intelligence network had been operating inside the State Department. 9 American employees, diplomats, translators, and support staff had been recruited by the IRGC to steal the most sensitive secrets of American foreign policy. Every negotiating strategy, every diplomatic cable, every back-channel communication. Tehran didn't just know what America was planning. They knew what America was thinking. The FBI had been tracking fragments of this network for 14 months. They had identified 9 compromised individuals across 3 continents. They had documented the flow of classified information from Foggy Bottom to Tehran. And they had discovered something that elevated the case from espionage to imminent national security crisis. Iran was using the stolen intelligence to sabotage upcoming nuclear negotiations. The last chance to prevent Tehran from achieving weapons-grade uranium enrichment. If those negotiations failed, military conflict was almost certain. The sabotage operation was 6 days away. This is how the FBI uncovered an Iranian spy ring at the heart of American diplomacy and prevented the manipulation that could have triggered a war. The investigation began with a defector's warning. In November 2023, a mid-level Iranian intelligence officer walked into the American embassy in Baku, Azerbaijan, and requested asylum. He claimed to have information about Iranian penetration of the U.S. government. CIA officers conducted the initial debriefing. What the defector described seemed almost too damaging to believe. He spoke of a network inside the State Department. Multiple sources. Years of operation. Direct reporting to the IRGC's Intelligence Directorate. He didn't know names. Compartmentalization protected that information, but he knew the network existed and he knew it had provided Tehran with comprehensive insight into American diplomatic strategy. The defector's information was passed to FBI counterintelligence. The hunt began. Finding spies inside the State Department was extraordinarily difficult. Unlike the Pentagon or intelligence agencies, the State Department's culture emphasized openness and information sharing. Diplomats were expected to communicate broadly, build relationships across agencies, and access diverse sources of information. The behaviors that might flag a spy in a more compartmentalized environment were normal at State. FBI investigators couldn't simply look for unusual access patterns. They had to identify individuals whose access, combined with other factors, suggested potential compromise. They began with the defector's fragments. The network reportedly focused on Iran policy. The sources had access to negotiating strategies and diplomatic cables. The intelligence had been flowing for approximately 4 years. These parameters narrowed the search, but still left hundreds of potential suspects. The investigation required patience, resources, and methodical elimination. The first confirmed source was identified in March 2024. A Farsi translator assigned to the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs had been exhibiting financial patterns inconsistent with his government salary. Expensive car, luxury apartment, international travel beyond what his income could support. FBI financial investigators traced the money. The translator was receiving regular deposits from a shell company registered in Turkey. The deposits, $8,000 to $15,000 monthly, were disguised as payments for consulting services to a language education company. The Turkish company was a front. Its ultimate ownership traced to entities associated with Iranian intelligence. Surveillance was authorized. Over the following weeks, FBI teams documented the translator's activities. He was photographing documents with his personal phone. He was meeting with an individual at the Iranian interests section of the Pakistan embassy, Iran's diplomatic channel in Washington since the countries severed direct relations. The translator was a spy, but he wasn't alone. FBI surveillance of the translator revealed connections to other State Department employees. The translator communicated regularly with a political officer in the Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation. The communications were encrypted, using commercial apps that complicated interception. The political officer had direct access to nuclear negotiation strategy. She attended planning meetings. She reviewed position papers. She knew what American negotiators would say before they said it. Investigation revealed she was also receiving unexplained payments, routed through a different shell company in the UAE. Two sources confirmed. The network continued to expand. Over the following months, FBI investigators identified 7 additional compromised individuals. A senior Foreign Service officer who had served 3 tours in Middle Eastern posts. His access to regional strategy was extensive, and his financial record showed payments totaling over $780,000 across 8 years. A communications specialist with access to the classified cable system. She could read virtually any diplomatic communication flowing through State Department channels. Her recruitment had apparently occurred during a posting to Istanbul, where IRGC officers had identified her gambling debts and offered to help. A staff assistant in the secretary's office who handled scheduling and briefing materials. Her access to high-level meetings and documents made her invaluable for understanding American decision-making at the highest levels. 2 additional translators who worked on Iran-related materials. Their language skills gave them access to sensitive communications, and their relatively low profiles made them unlikely targets for counterintelligence scrutiny. A budget analyst who could track funding for diplomatic initiatives and covert programs. His information helped Tehran understand which American efforts were serious and which were bureaucratic theater. A consular officer stationed in Dubai who facilitated communications between the network and Iranian handlers. His diplomatic cover provided perfect concealment for intelligence activities. 9 sources in total. 4 years of operation. Comprehensive penetration of American diplomatic strategy on Iran. The damage assessment was staggering. FBI analysts reviewed the information the network had likely transmitted based on the source's access profiles. Tehran had received real-time intelligence on American negotiating positions for every significant diplomatic engagement over 4 years. Sanctions discussions, nuclear talks, regional security consultations, back-channel communications with European allies. Tehran had received advance warning of American diplomatic initiatives, allowing them to prepare counter-strategies before American diplomats even arrived at the negotiating table. Tehran had received insight into internal American debates, understanding which officials favored engagement and which favored confrontation, allowing them to tailor their approach accordingly. Tehran had received information about American intelligence assessments, potentially revealing sources and methods that American agencies had used to monitor Iranian activities. The penetration explained years of diplomatic frustration. American negotiators had repeatedly been outmaneuvered. Carefully planned initiatives had failed. Promising openings had collapsed. The Iranians had seemed to know everything, because they did. The urgency escalated in September 2024. New nuclear negotiations were scheduled to begin in Vienna in 10 days. The talks represented potentially the last opportunity to reach a diplomatic solution before Iran achieved weapons-grade enrichment capability. American intelligence indicated that Iran was within months of having enough enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon. If the Vienna talks failed, military options would move to the forefront. The stakes could not have been higher. FBI surveillance. Intercepted communications indicating that the spy network was preparing a major intelligence transmission. The network had obtained the complete American strategy for the Vienna talks: negotiating positions, red lines, concession sequences, walkaway points. If that intelligence reached Tehran, the talks were doomed. Iranian negotiators would know exactly how to manipulate their American counterparts. They would know which pressure would crack American resolve. They would know how to extract maximum concessions while giving nothing in return. The talks would fail. Military conflict would become nearly inevitable. The intelligence transmission was scheduled for 6 days before the talks began. Operation Foggy Betrayal was authorized immediately. The operation required extraordinary coordination. 9 targets spread across Washington and overseas posts. Evidence collection that had to be completed before arrests. Diplomatic implications that could affect relationships with allies. And a timeline that left no room for error. The FBI coordinated with the State Department's Bureau of Diplomatic Security. Only a handful of senior officials were briefed. The network's existence had to remain secret until the arrests. The operation would proceed in phases. Phase 1. Final evidence collection. FBI teams would document the planned intelligence transmission, capturing proof of espionage that would be crucial for prosecution. Phase 2. Simultaneous arrests. All 9 targets would be taken into custody within a narrow time window, preventing warning communications. Phase 3. Damage control. American negotiators in Vienna would be briefed on the compromise and provided with new strategies that the Iranians hadn't seen. Phase 4. Diplomatic messaging. Back channels would inform Tehran that their intelligence had been compromised, creating uncertainty about what they actually knew. Execution would begin in 72 hours. The final intelligence transmission was allowed to proceed under FBI observation. The senior Foreign Service officer who served as the network's coordinator received the Vienna negotiating strategy through normal diplomatic channels. FBI surveillance watched as he photographed the documents using a specially modified phone that transmitted encrypted images directly to a server controlled by Iranian intelligence. The transmission was documented. The evidence was captured. Then the FBI made their move. Before the transmission could reach Iranian analysts, American intelligence agencies, working with Allied services, disrupted the server infrastructure. The images were intercepted. The intelligence never reached Tehran. The network believed their transmission had succeeded. They were wrong. The arrests began at 4:30 a.m. Eastern Time. FBI tactical teams executed warrants simultaneously at 7 locations in the Washington area. 2 additional arrests occurred overseas, in Dubai and Frankfurt, coordinated with host country security services. At a Georgetown townhouse, the senior Foreign Service officer was arrested as he prepared for his morning routine. His home contained a concealed safe with $340,000 in cash and encrypted devices that would provide evidence of years of espionage. At an apartment in Arlington, the political officer was detained as she left for work. Her laptop contained copies of classified documents spanning 4 years of Iran nuclear negotiations. At a residential complex in Bethesda, the Farsi translator was arrested in front of his family. The man who had first attracted FBI attention through his finances now faced life in federal prison. The communications specialist, the staff assistant, the additional translators, the budget analyst. All were in custody within 90 minutes. In Dubai, the consular officer was arrested by UAE security services, acting on an American request. He would be extradited to face charges. In Frankfurt, a meeting between a network member traveling on official business and an Iranian handler was disrupted by German authorities. Both were detained. The network was destroyed. The interrogations revealed the full scope of the compromise. Several defendants attempted to maintain cover stories. They were consultants. They were helping with academic research. They had no idea their contacts were Iranian intelligence. The evidence destroyed every defense. Encrypted communications explicitly discussed Iranian handlers. Financial records traced payments to IRGC affiliated entities. Surveillance footage documented meetings with known Iranian intelligence officers. Faced with overwhelming evidence, most defendants chose cooperation. They described their recruitment, often during overseas postings, where Iranian intelligence officers had identified vulnerabilities and made approaches. They described their handlers, professionals who managed them with a combination of payments and ideological manipulation. They described their methods, photographing documents, memorizing briefing contents, accessing colleagues' files, and they described the damage. 4 years of comprehensive intelligence on American diplomatic strategy. Every negotiating position, every internal debate, every secret communication. Tehran had known everything. The Vienna negotiations proceeded with new strategies. American diplomats arrived at the talks with positions that the Iranian delegation had never seen. The compromise strategies had been replaced. The intelligence Tehran thought they possessed was worthless. Iranian negotiators were visibly confused. They had prepared for an American approach that never materialized. Their carefully planned responses addressed positions that weren't offered. Their anticipated pressure points found no purchase. For the first time in years, American diplomats had the advantage. The talks didn't produce a final agreement. The issues were too complex for rapid resolution. But they produced a framework that continued negotiations and delayed Iranian progress toward weapons capability. Military conflict was averted. The spy network Sabotage had failed. The prosecution of the 9 defendants proceeded through federal courts. The charges were severe: conspiracy to commit espionage, transmission of classified information to a foreign government, acting as agents of a foreign power. Several charges carried potential death penalties. Defense attorneys attempted various strategies. Some argued their clients had been entrapped by FBI surveillance. The evidence showed years of espionage before FBI awareness, destroying the entrapment defense. Others claim the classified information wasn't actually damaging. Expert testimony from intelligence officials detailed the catastrophic impact of the compromise. A few tried to negotiate plea agreements in exchange for testimony about Iranian intelligence methods. 7 defendants ultimately pleaded guilty to various charges. 2 went to trial and were convicted on all counts. Sentences ranged from 20 years to life in federal prison without parole. The senior Foreign Service officer received a life sentence. the most severe punishment available after prosecutors declined to seek the death penalty. The investigation exposed systematic vulnerabilities in State Department security. The 9 compromised individuals had maintained security clearances throughout their espionage activities. Financial irregularities went undetected. Foreign contacts went unreported. Document access patterns raised no alarms. The State Department's culture of openness had been exploited. Congressional hearings examined the failures. How had the network operated for 4 years without detection? How had financial red flags been missed? How had foreign intelligence officers successfully recruited serving American diplomats? The answers prompted significant reforms. Enhanced financial monitoring for personnel with access to sensitive negotiations. Improved vetting for foreign language specialists. Stronger counterintelligence coordination between state and FBI. Regular polygraph examinations for employees in sensitive positions. The diplomatic security apparatus was rebuilt. The geopolitical implications extended beyond the immediate crisis. The exposure of Iranian penetration at state demonstrated the comprehensive nature of IRGC intelligence operations. Iran wasn't just seeking nuclear capability. They were actively working to compromise American institutions that might prevent them from achieving it. Allies were briefed on the compromise. Diplomatic communications that allies had shared with American counterparts had potentially been transmitted to Tehran. The security implications affected relationships worldwide. New protocols were established for sharing sensitive information. Allied services increased their own counterintelligence vigilance. The exposure became a case study in the risks of state-sponsored espionage. Iran denied all involvement. State media characterized the arrests as fabrications and anti-Iranian hysteria. The government claimed the defendants were innocent Americans persecuted for political purposes. The evidence told a different story. The 9 individuals who had betrayed their country faced consequences beyond imprisonment. Their families were devastated. Spouses discovered that their partners had been living double lives. Children learned that their parents had sold out their country for money. Their colleagues felt betrayed. Foreign service officers who had worked alongside the spies questioned every interaction. Sensitive conversations they had shared now seemed like intelligence opportunities. The diplomatic community experienced a crisis of trust. Security procedures that had seemed excessive now seemed inadequate. Colleagues who had been friends now seemed like potential threats. The damage to institutional culture would take years to repair. For American foreign policy, the network's exposure was both a loss and an opportunity. The loss was clear. 4 years of diplomatic strategy had been compromised. Negotiations that might have succeeded had failed because Tehran knew every American move. Opportunities for progress had been squandered, but the opportunity was also significant. With the network destroyed, American diplomats could operate without Iranian insight into their strategies. Negotiations could proceed with genuine uncertainty on both sides. The playing field was leveled. The Vienna framework continued to develop. Progress was slow but real. The path toward conflict had been diverted, at least temporarily. None of it would have been possible if the spy network had remained operational. The FBI agents who worked Operation Foggy Betrayal understood the stakes. They had prevented the sabotage of negotiations that represented the last chance to avoid war. They had exposed a network that had compromised American diplomacy for years. They had demonstrated that even the most sensitive institutions could be penetrated, and that those penetrations could be detected. The service members who might have fought a war that didn't happen would never know how close conflict came. The diplomats who achieved progress at Vienna would never know how their predecessors had been undermined. The American public would never fully understand how espionage had shaped events they read about in newspapers. That's the nature of counterintelligence work. The victories are invisible. The catastrophes that don't happen leave no trace. The success is measured in crises averted and wars avoided. Iranian intelligence continues to target American institutions. The recruitment approaches continue. The probing of vulnerabilities continues. The search for individuals who might be compromised continues. The State Department has hardened its defenses. But no defense is perfect. Somewhere, right now, an Iranian intelligence officer is identifying a potential target, assessing vulnerabilities, planning an approach, building toward recruitment, and somewhere, an FBI counterintelligence agent is watching, looking for the patterns, following the money, building the case that will prevent the next betrayal. That's where the next investigation begins. That's how the next catastrophe will be prevented. This is what the FBI does, every day, whether you know it or not.